The morning sun shone bright over New Terra. Captain Hansel Kim stood on his front porch, drinking coffee and watching his 12-year-old daughter Nari feed the chickens in their backyard. The air smelled of fresh grass and blooming flowers. It was a perfect day on their small colony world. "Dad, look," Nari called out, pointing to the sky. "What are those?" Hansel looked up and nearly dropped his coffee cup. Dark shapes were moving across the blue sky. They were too big to be clouds and too dark to be normal ships. As he watched, the shapes grew larger and larger. "Nari, come inside right now," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But Dad, I want to." "See now?" Nari heard the serious tone in her father's voice. She dropped the chicken feed and ran to the house. Hansel grabbed his daughter's hand and pulled her inside. He locked the door and went straight to his communication device. "This is Captain Kim calling Colony Control. We have unknown objects in our sky. Please respond," the radio crackled. "Colony Control here. Captain, we see them too. 5 massive ships approaching fast. We have never seen anything like them." Hansel looked out his window. The ships were close enough now to see clearly. His blood turned cold. These were not normal spacecraft. They looked like giant dragons made of dark metal. Each ship was at least 2 miles long, with wings that seemed to move like they were alive. Their surfaces had scales that reflected light like mirrors. At the front of each ship were huge heads with glowing golden eyes. "Dear God," Hansel whispered. The dragon ships moved slowly over the colony's main town. They cast huge shadows that made the day seem like night. People ran out of their houses to look up at the sky. Some pointed and took pictures. Others screamed and ran back inside. Dr. Bir Ali was in her laboratory when the first ship passed overhead. She was the colony's best scientist, someone who studied alien life forms. But she had never seen anything like this. The ship above, her lab was so big that it blocked out the sun completely. She grabbed her scanner and pointed it at the ship. The readings made no sense. The metal seemed to be alive. It had a heartbeat. It had blood flowing through it. This was not just a machine. It was some kind of living creature made of metal. "This is impossible," she said to herself. Every communication device in the colony turned on at the same time. Radios, phones, computers, even simple alarm clocks began to speak with the same voice. It was deep and cold, like the sound of metal scraping against stone. "Humans of New Terra." The voice was so loud that windows shook. Children began to cry. Adults covered their ears. "I am Supreme Talon Kithfer of the Vorthok. Your world has been chosen." Hansel held Nari close to him. His daughter was shaking, but not as much as he expected. Most children were screaming in terror, but Nari seemed more confused than scared. "We are the Vorthok. We are the hunters of the galaxy. We are the fire that burns in the darkness. For 10,000 years, we have traveled the stars, seeking worlds like yours." Dr. Lee grabbed her emergency phone and called Captain Kim. "Are you getting this?" "Yes. What do you think they want?" "Nothing good," she replied, watching her instruments go crazy as the alien voice continued. "Your species will be tested. We call this the culling trials. Some of you may prove worthy to serve us. The rest will feed us. We require life force of lesser beings to maintain our immortal existence." The voice paused. In that silence, every person on New Terra felt their heart stop for a moment. "You have 72 hours to prepare. Gather your strongest, gather your bravest, gather your most clever. They will have the best chance to survive. The weak, the old, the sick. They will be consumed first." Nari looked up at her father. "Dad, what does consumed mean?" Hansel's face was white as paper. "It means ... It means they want to eat us, sweetheart." The alien voice spoke again. "Do not attempt to flee. The world is now surrounded by our hunting net. No ship can leave. No show's monoxide message can be sent to other worlds. You are alone with us." Outside, people were running in the streets. Some went to their cars, trying to drive away from the town. Others gathered their families and headed for the mountains. A few just stood in their yards, looking up at the dragon ships with blank expressions. Captain Kim had been a soldier on Earth before coming to New Terra. He had fought in wars and seen terrible things, but nothing had prepared him for this. These aliens were not here to trade or explore. They were here to hunt humans like animals. "Listen to me," he said into his radio. "This is Captain Kim to all colony defense personnel. Report to the community center immediately. We need to organize. Hansel, Dr. Lee's voice came through his phone. I'm reading some very strange energy patterns from these ships. I think I need to study them more. There might be something we can use. Do whatever you can, Biora. I'm gathering everyone who can fight. The dragon ships settled into positions around the colony. They did not land. Instead, they floated about a mile above the ground, their golden eyes constantly watching. Smaller creatures flew out of the ship's things that looked like metal. Birds with sharp claws. These scouts circled the colony, counting the humans below. In the community center, Hansel found about 50 people. Some were former soldiers, like himself. Others were farmers who owned hunting rifles. A few were just brave citizens who wanted to help protect their families. What do we know about these aliens? Asked Dongmin Park, a farmer who had served. In the colony's security force, not much, Hansel replied. They call themselves the Vorthok. They seem to think they're some kind of superior species. They want to test us and then eat most of us. Asked Janae Cho, a young woman who worked at the spaceport. Hansel looked around the room. These people were brave, but they were not soldiers. They had farm tools and a few old weapons. The aliens had ships that looked like living dragons. Don't know, he said honestly, but we have to try. We have families to protect. While her father met with the other adults, Nari sat by her bedroom window, watching the dragon ships. Unlike the other children, she was not crying or hiding. The alien's voice had been scary, but it had not made her feel the terrible fear that seemed to affect everyone else. She could see one of the ships clearly from her window. Its golden eyes seemed to look right at her. For a moment, she thought, she could feel something touching her mind, something cold and hungry. But instead of being afraid, she felt angry. You're just bullies, she whispered to the ship. Big, mean bullies. As the first day ended, the people of New Terra tried to prepare for whatever was coming. Some packed supplies and hid in basements or caves. Others gathered weapons and made plans to fight. A few just held their families close and waited. Dr. Lee worked through the night in her laboratory, studying the energy readings from the alien ships. She discovered something interesting. The ships seemed to get stronger when people were afraid. The more terror and panic in the colony, the brighter the ship's golden eyes became. But when acts of courage happened, when someone helped a neighbor or comforted a crying child, the ships seemed to dim slightly. It was a small change, but it was real. Hansel, she called her friend, I think I'm onto something. These aliens might not be as powerful as they seem. But Hansel was busy organizing defenses. He did not have time to listen to scientific theories. His little girl was in danger, and he would do anything to protect her. The dragon ships waited in the sky, patient as death itself. In 71 hours, the hunting would begin. Dr. Biora Lee had not slept for 24 hours. She sat in her laboratory, surrounded by books, computer screens, and strange readings from her instruments. The dragon ships still floated above the colony, their golden eyes watching everything. Below, there has to be something, she whispered to herself. No species becomes this powerful without having a weakness. She had been searching through old space records, looking for any mention of the Vorthok. Most files were empty or damaged. These aliens had been very good at erasing their history, but finally she found something. It was an old message from a destroyed planet called Zarian. The message was broken and hard to read, but it told a terrible story. The Vorthok had come to Zarian 300 years ago. They had done the same thing in Out's trials, tested the people, then consumed most of them. But the message said something else. It talked about how the Vorthok looked different than they did now. Back then, they were smaller, more like normal people. They had not always been dragon-like creatures. They changed themselves, Biora said, reading more carefully. They became what they needed to be to scare other species. She found more fragments of information. The Vorthok had once been explorers, like humans. They had traveled the galaxy to learn and discover new things, but somewhere in their history, they had discovered how to feed on the life force of other beings. It made them stronger and helped them live forever. The problem was that once they started feeding on others, they could not stop. It became like a drug to them. They needed more and more fear and life energy to survive. Over thousands of years, they had changed their bodies to look like the monsters that scared most species dragons. They're not naturally this way, Biora. realized they made themselves into monsters. Meanwhile, Captain Hansel Kim was trying to organize the colony's defenses. It was not going well. The dragon ships had destroyed all the satellites around New Terra. The spaceport was surrounded by an energy field that stopped any ship from taking off. They were trapped. "We need to focus on protecting the children," said Dongman Park. "If we can hide them somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe," interrupted Jin-Ho. "Those ships can see everything. They have scouts flying around all the time." Hansel looked out the window of the community center. He could see one of the metal bird scouts perched on a building across the street. Its red eyes were watching them through the window. "Maybe we should try to communicate with them," suggested an older man named Hoseok Lim. "Perhaps we can make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Hansel asked. "They already told us what they want. Some of us as slaves, the rest as food." Young Nari had spent the day walking around the colony, while other children hid in their houses. She seemed drawn to watch the alien ships. She was not the only one who noticed something strange about herself. Her teacher, Sunya Yoon, had been watching Nari carefully. "That child is different," she told Nari's father when he came to check on the school. When the alien voice spoke yesterday, all the children screamed and cried. But Nari just looked confused. She was not afraid like the others. Hansel frowned. "What do you think that means?" "I do not know. But maybe Dr. Lee should look at her. Something is protecting that girl from whatever power these aliens have." That evening, Hansel brought Nari to Dr. Lee's laboratory. Biora had special equipment that could measure things normal doctors could not see. Double quotes, "Hello, Nari," Biora said kindly. "I just want to check something. Can you put your hand on this scanner?" Nari placed her small hand on the glowing panel. Immediately, the machine began showing numbers that made Biora's eyes go wide. "This is impossible," Biora whispered. "What is it?" Hansel asked. "Nari's brain is producing a kind of energy I have never seen before. It is like she has a natural shield against psychic attacks." "What does that mean?" Bora looked at the little girl, who was examining the laboratory equipment with curious eyes. "It means the alien's mental power cannot affect her as much as it affects other people. She has a natural resistance." As they talked, something happened outside. One of the dragon ships was sending down a beam of light. The light touched a house at the edge of town. Immediately, the people inside that house began screaming. Hansel, Bora, and Nari ran outside to see what was happening. The light was pulling something invisible up from the house, something that made the dragon ship's eyes glow brighter. "They're feeding," Biora realized with horror. "They're taking the life energy from that family." But then something strange happened. Nari stepped forward and shouted at the dragon ship, "Stop it! Leave them alone!" Her young voice was small compared to the massive alien vessel. But something amazing occurred. The light beam flickered. For just a moment, it seemed to weaken. The dragon ship's golden eyes turned to look at Nari. She stared back at it without fear. The beam of light stopped completely, and the ship moved away from the house. "Did you see that?" Biora asked Hansel in excitement. When Nari showed courage instead of fear, the ship stopped feeding. They ran to the house that had been attacked. The family inside was alive but very weak. They looked like they had aged. 10 years in 10 minutes. "What happened to you?" Hansel asked. "It felt like something was pulling the life out of us," the father said weakly. "We felt so tired, so hopeless. But then suddenly it stopped." Biora was taking readings with her portable scanner. "Your life energy is very low, but you are recovering." Something interrupted the feeding process. Over the next few hours, Biora made more discoveries. She found that the Vorthok had 3 different types of aliens. The warriors were called Talons. They were the biggest and strongest, with sharp claws and teeth. The workers were called Scales, were smaller, and did most of the technical work on the ships. The leaders were called Flames. They had the strongest psychic powers and could control the minds of other species. But all 3 types needed the same thing to survive: fear and life, energy from other beings. Without it, they would grow weak and eventually die. "It is like they are addicted to fear," Biora explained to Hansel and the other colony leaders. "They have been doing this for so long that they cannot live without it." "But why do they look like dragons?" asked Dongmin. "Because dragons are scary to most species," Bora replied. "Fear makes them stronger. so they change their bodies to look as frightening as possible. The more afraid we are, the more powerful they become. Hansel thought about his daughter's strange resistance to the aliens' power. So if we are not afraid, they become weaker. I think so, but it is not easy. Their psychic power is very strong. Most people cannot resist the fear they create. Outside, the night was falling. The dragon ships seemed to glow brighter in the darkness. Tomorrow would be the second day, and the aliens had said the trials would last 3 days total. Nari sat by her bedroom window again, looking up at the ships. She could feel something trying to touch her mind, something cold and hungry. But instead of fear, she felt something else. She felt sorry for the creatures in those ships. "You are not always monsters," she whispered. "Someone hurt you a long time ago, and you forgot how to be good." The golden eyes of the nearest ship seemed to flicker when she spoke. For just a moment, they looked sad instead of hungry. Worked through another night, trying to understand more about the Vorthok. She discovered that they had destroyed hundreds of worlds over the centuries. But she also found something else, records of a few planets that had survived their visits. Those worlds had something in common. In each case, the people had found ways to work together and support each other even when they were afraid. The planets that survived were the ones where hope had been stronger than fear. Hope, she said to herself. That might be the key. As the second day began, the people of New Terra did not know that their salvation might come from the smallest and bravest among them. They did not know that the monsters in the sky had once been explorers like themselves. But they were about to learn that even the most terrible dragons had weaknesses. And sometimes those weaknesses could only be found by someone too young to understand why she should be afraid. The third day arrived with dark clouds covering the sky. The dragon ships moved closer to the ground, their golden eyes brighter than ever. At exactly noon, the cold voice of Supreme Talon Kithfer filled the air again. The first trial begins. Now, 100 of your kind will be released into the wilderness. We will hunt them. Those who survive until sunset may continue to the next trial. Beams of light shot down from the ships. Captain Hansel Kim was one of them. He felt the light surround him and lift him into the air. "Nari," he shouted as he was pulled upward. His daughter ran outside and watched her father disappear into one of the dragon ships. Dr. Biora Lee was also taken, along with Dungman Park and many others. Inside the ship, Hansel found himself in a dark metal room with 99 other people. The walls seemed alive, breathing slowly like a giant creature. Strange symbols glowed on the surfaces, and he could hear a sound like a heartbeat coming from everywhere. "Where are we?" asked a frightened woman. "Inside one of their ships," Hansel replied. "Stay calm, we need to work together. You will be released at different points in the forest. The hunt will last until sunset. We enjoy a good chase, run well, little prey." The floor beneath their feet began to move. Groups of 10 people were dropped through holes that opened suddenly. Hansel found himself falling through the air with 9 strangers. They landed hard in thick bushes near a stream. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, helping an elderly man to his feet. Dr. Lee was in his group, along with young Minho Park, a boy whose parents had not been chosen for the hunt. The boy was trying not to cry. "We need to move," Biora said, looking at her scanner. "I am detecting movement in the sky. The hunters are coming." They ran through the forest as fast as they could. Behind them, they could hear sounds that made their blood freeze, roars and screeches that no earth animal had ever made. The Vorthok hunters were not using their ships. They were hunting on foot, or whatever they used instead of feet. "This way," Hansel whispered, leading them toward a rocky area where they might find caves to hide in, but the aliens were fast. Soon they could hear heavy footsteps crashing through the trees behind them. Hansel risked a look back and wished he had not. The creature chasing them was 7 feet tall and covered in dark scales. It had long arms that ended in sharp claws, and its head looked like a dragon's skull with burning red eyes. It moved on 2 legs, but could also run on all 4 limbs when it wanted to go faster, faster. Hansel shouted. They reached the rocky area and found a small cave. All 10 of them squeezed inside just as the hunter arrived outside. They could hear it sniffing the air, trying to find their scent. Little Minho was shaking with fear. The alien hunters seemed to sense this and moved closer to their hiding spot. Its red eyes appeared at the cave entrance. But then something unexpected happened. Minho stopped shaking and started to giggle. "What are you doing?" Dr. Lee whispered. "It is ugly," Minho said, still giggling quietly. "It looks like my little sister when she is angry." The hunter's red eyes flickered. It took a step backward, looking confused. For a moment, it seemed weaker, less frightening. Hansel realized what was happening. When Minho stopped being afraid and started finding the situation funny, the alien lost some of its power. "Everyone listen," he whispered quickly. "Think of something that makes you happy. Remember good times with your family. Do not think about being afraid." The group tried to follow his advice. Some thought about their children. Others remembered happy days before the aliens came. Slowly, the hunter outside became less sure of itself. It wandered away, still searching but no longer focused on their cave. They waited until dark before coming out. In the distance, they could see lights from the dragon ships searching the forest. Not all the humans had been as lucky as they were. When the hunt ended, only 60 people came back to the colony. 40 had been caught by the hunters. The survivors were tired and scared, but they were alive. Nari ran to hug her father when he returned. "I knew you would come back," she said. How Hansel asked, "Because you are brave, and brave people do not give up." Dr. Lee had used her scanner during the hunt to study the aliens. "I learned something important," she told Hansel privately. "When we stopped being afraid, the hunters became weaker." Supreme Talon Kithfer was not pleased with the results of the hunt. Too many. Humans had survived, and some had even fought back successfully. The fourth day brought the second trial. This time, the aliens did not take people from the colony. Instead, they created holographic images in the sky above the town. The images showed the 40 people who had been caught during the hunt. The holograms were terrible to watch. Others looked sick and weak. Children cried as they saw their parents in the images. Parents screamed when they saw their children. Are these images real? Supreme Talon Kithfer's voice asked. Or are they just pictures to make you suffer? We will not tell you. Your pain feeds us either way. The holograms played all day long. People could not look away, even though watching made them feel hopeless and sad. The dragon ships grew brighter as they fed on the despair of the colony. Nari watched the images too, but they affected her differently than they affected others. While the adults cried and worried, she felt angry instead of sad. "Life is not always fair, Nari," the teacher replied sadly. "But we do not have to let them make us feel bad," Nari said. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about heroes who never gave up, even when things looked hopeless." Nori began to tell one of her grandmother's old Korean folk tales about a clever girl who defeated a dragon by refusing to be afraid of it. As she spoke, other children gathered around to listen. Her voice was clear and strong, cutting through the sounds of crying and despair. The story was about a village that was terrorized by a great dragon. All the warriors had tried to fight it and failed, but a young girl realized that the dragon was actually very lonely. Instead of fighting it, she talked to it and discovered that it had forgotten how to be anything except scary, as Nari told the story. The dragon ship's golden eyes dimmed slightly. Dr. Lee was watching from her laboratory window. Her instruments showed that the ship's power levels were dropping as hope returned to some of the colonists. "Hope is like poison to them," she whispered to herself. "The more we have, the weaker they become." But the aliens were not stupid. They had been doing this for thousands of years. When they noticed their power levels dropping, they changed their tactics. New holograms appeared, showing even worse things. The images were so terrible that many adults had to look away. She stood up in the middle of the town square and began to sing an old lullaby her mother had taught her before she died. Her young voice rose above the sounds of fear and sadness. Other children began to sing with her. Then some of the adults joined in, remembering the song from their own childhoods. The simple melody spread through the colony like a warm breeze. People began to remember that they were not alone, that they still had each other even in this dark time. The dragon ships shook as the colonists' voices grew stronger. Their golden eyes flickered like candles in the wind. Supreme Talon Kithfer felt something he had not experienced in centuries' uncertainty. When the second trial ended, only 30 colonists remained active. The others had been broken by despair and sat in their homes, staring at nothing. But those 30 who remained were stronger than before. They had learned that hope could fight back against the aliens' power. The 5th day was the last day. At dawn, beams of light took the 30 remaining active colonists up to the largest dragon ship. They found themselves in a huge chamber with walls that pulsed like a living heart. Supreme Talon Kithver stood. Before them, he was enormous, 12 feet tall, with scales that shimmered like black oil. His golden eyes burned with ancient hunger. Wings spread from his back, and his claws could have cut through steel. "This is the final trial." His voice boomed through the chamber. "You will choose 10 of your number to be consumed immediately. If you do not choose, all 30 will die slowly over many days." The humans looked at each other in horror. The alien was asking them to decide who would die. It was the cruelest choice possible. "We will not choose," said Hansel firmly. "We will not help you murder our friends." "Then all will suffer," Kithver replied. But before anyone else could speak, Nerisse stepped forward. She had somehow gotten onto the ship with the adults, though no one had seen her taken by the light beams. "I choose myself," she said in her clear, brave voice. "Nari, no," her father shouted. "Someone has to go first," she said simply. "It might as well be me." Her act of courage sent shock waves through the ship's living systems. The walls flickered, and the golden lights dimmed. Other colonists felt inspired by her sacrifice. Dr. Lee stepped forward. "I choose myself too." Then Teacher Sunya and me. One by one, 7 more adults volunteered. They included Dongmin Park and other parents who wanted to protect the children in the colony below. But as they were led toward what looked like feeding chambers, something extraordinary happened. The colonists who had not been chosen began to sing the lullaby Nari had taught them the day before. Their voices echoed through the ship's chambers. The simple melody spoke of love, hope, and the refusal to let evil win. Even some of the volunteers joined in, singing as they walked toward what they thought was their death. The effect on the ship was immediate and devastating. The living walls began to crack. Golden light flickered and went out in sections. Ship's heartbeat became irregular and weak. Supreme Talon Kithver screamed in rage and pain. The sound of humans choosing love over fear was like acid to his ancient evil. Nari realized that this moment was the key to everything. The aliens were not just feeding on fear, they were completely dependent on it. Hope and love were not just distractions to them. These feelings were actual poison. She walked up to Supreme Talon Kithver, even though he towered over her like a dark mountain. The ancient alien looked down at the 12-year-old girl with confusion. No prey had ever approached him willingly without fear. "You were not always like this," Nari said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You used to be different." Her words hit the Supreme Talon like physical blows. Deep in his mind, stirred memories he had buried for thousands of years. Nari reached out with her natural psychic resistance and touched his thoughts. What she found there was not just a monster, but a creature that had once been curious and kind, like a child exploring the universe. She showed him images from her own mind, her father's love, her mother's lullabies, the simple joy of feeding chickens on a sunny morning. She showed him what his people had lost when they chose to become predators. The psychic contact revealed the truth about the Vorthok. They had once been explorers, traveling the galaxy to learn and discover new things. But they had encountered a species that fed on life energy and had defeated it. In studying their enemy's power, they had become addicted to it themselves. Over centuries, they had transformed themselves into the very monsters they had once fought. They had forgotten their original nature so completely that they believed they had always been predators. Supreme Talon Kithver felt something he had not experienced in millennia: the possibility of redemption. The little girl's courage and compassion showed him a reflection of what his people had once been. The choice was agony. For thousands of years, he had been a creature of fear and hunger. But Nari's touch reminded him of something deeper and older: the joy of discovery, the wonder of meeting new forms of life, the satisfaction of creating instead of destroying. With a sound like breaking chains, he made his decision. "Stop the trials," he commanded his fleet. The other Vorthok were shocked. Some tried to refuse the order, but Kithver's psychic power was greater than theirs. "We will no longer feed on fear. We will remember what we once were." The decision sent psychic shockwaves through the entire fleet. The living ships, which had been grown to resemble dragons and feed on terror, began to change. Their dragon heads softened into more gentle shapes. Many of the Vorthok could not survive the transformation. Their bodies had been too changed by centuries of feeding on fear. But some, led by Kithfer, adapted and survived. They became smaller, more like their ancient ancestors. The Supreme Talon, now much smaller, and with scales that shimmered like starlight, knelt before Nari. "Forgive us, little teacher," he said, his voice no longer cold and terrible, but warm and sad. "We had forgotten who we were meant to be." "Everyone makes mistakes," Nari replied. "The important thing is to try to do better." Instead, they began a new mission to find the worlds they had damaged over the centuries and try to repair what they had broken. They left behind advanced technology and a promise that they would spend the rest of their existence undoing the harm they had caused across the galaxy. Nari returned to her life on New Terra, but she was changed by her experience. She had touched the mind of an ancient alien and helped it find redemption. She became a bridge between species, teaching others that even the worst enemies might once have been friends. The colony rebuilt and grew stronger. When other ships arrived, traders and explorers from distant worlds, they found humans who were known throughout the galaxy as the people who had turned dragons back into explorers. And Nari, she continued to tell stories to children, stories about courage and hope and the power of choosing love over fear. She taught them that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer friendship to someone who has forgotten how to be kind. The dragon's pride had indeed ended in flames, but from those flames, both species had found a path to something better. The universe was a little brighter because a 12-year-old girl had refused to be afraid and instead chose to show compassion to a monster. In the end, that choice had saved not just her own people, but the souls of their enemies as well.